says it's 9:29, so. Good.
We're all a little surprised. New changes depending which side of the where he's sleeping.
I thought it was standing seat was up the back there with me. Unfortunately, as the video is going, I don't want to live stream non-family messages to you. Family viewing.
Morena, everybody. It's 9:30 and welcome to the first of the Finance Committees for 2022. This is the committee known as the Beating Heart of Council, and it's always the first committee off the rank each year. So I'm very pleased that we're all back from holiday mode and ready to engross ourselves in what is the wonderful finances of Council, and a special welcome to our Mongai Kayleen, and also Jadine, sorry, and also to members of the public who may be online for this meeting. So I declare the meeting open and call for any apologies.
Still going, and I know that you like a quick meeting. At about 20 to 3 I have to go.
I think everybody likes quick meetings. Thank you, Councillor Dave. 2:30. 2:45, okay. Right, the pressure's on to conclude businesses. All right, thank you for that. I'll move that there are no apologies. Seconder, thank you. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Aye. Confirmation of the agenda. I'll move confirmation of the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Ewan.
To the chair of the Beating Heart Committee, I'm wondering whether he really does have a beating heart, because I see no chair's report. Could these fill in for the chair? Please explain.
I felt that this meeting might be best served not having a chair's report. And I've asked the staff to make a number of comments during the course of today's meeting about getting us readied and prepped for next week's first session on the annual plan. So there's some method in not having a report this time, but I can assure you that we will have one next time. Thank you, Councillor Dave. Okay, so moving the agenda, seconded by Councillor Ewan. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Any declarations of interest? All right, there are none. Public forum, we have no one online or in the chamber this morning, so there's no public forum. Item 5 is confirmation of the Finance Committee open minutes of the 14th of December. I'll ask if there are any changes. If there are no changes, I will move the minutes. Do I have
happy to second, Chair? Yep,
thank you, Councillor Maxine. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. All right, so item 6 is the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report, and welcome Ian to come forward to the table and give us a verbal commentary on his report before we seek any questions. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, councillors. Today I'm presenting the 5-month financial performance on the Capital Portfolio Report. This is only 1 month forward from the previous report that you received on the 14th of December. I will endeavour to give you a quick update on where we are based on the January results, because they were just released yesterday. I just thought that'd be a little bit more timely than, because 5 months as November was quite a little while ago. Before I do that, though, I will just make the committee aware that there is an additional recommendation in the report today. we've brought in there, in addition to the standard recommendation. This recommendation is we're looking for approval to increase the scope on contract 188, which is an existing contract we have with CB Civil, and it's to include the Snell Drive pump station. The reason we've done that is this is a critical project. It's approved already in the 2131, and by being able to increase the scope with CB Civil, who are well qualified to undertake this work, it will enable us to move the project with pace. So that recommendation's in there, and there's narrative in there as well. And if you need further detail, we've got Mr. Allen and Mr. Barton sitting behind me who can talk to that. In terms of the standard capital monitoring report, it is a 5-month result, and the spend at the 5-month period was 100.6 million with associated revenue of 39.2 million. That's tracking consistently with what we were expecting. And just as an update now, the January 31st January result was 100, is now sitting at 133. Which was as expected, keeping in mind that January tends to be a very low month in terms of construction due to the Christmas holiday period and the downtime in the construction market. So just to reiterate, so now sitting at 133 at the 7-month mark, and I'm sure we'll report that more formally in future committees. The approved budget is now being reported at 351.3 million for the year. And in paragraph 30, you'll see provided a table with more summary detail on how we moved from the approved LTP position, the 328 starting position that's signed off, through to that 351. And then, well, this is the first time, or the first iteration on this report is I've also an attachment to given you quite a detailed breakdown of how the budget is moving at a what we call at the program or the project level from the start of the year through to now, so that you've got confidence and you understand how these budget changes are tracking and in what projects they are affecting. It would be fair to say that the biggest movement we're seeing in the approved budget change since the last committee is that we are now signifying 40.5 million in deferrals. So we are presenting those for your approval today to actually officially identify them as deferrals and move them to future periods. But what I did want to reiterate again is that, and we spoke in the last meeting, is that we're still estimating annual deferrals for this year at 90 million. And why that is critical is it's a very important metric in terms of the annual plan debate that you're going to have next week in the workshop, and understanding the deferrals and the amount they have and the impact they have on the financial strategy modelling. So we're still confident in that 90 million. And that's the reason we do that. You also note in the report, and Councillor Rob had asked for clarity on this, is that we've indicated through to the finance team to have those deferrals spread equally over the next 2 financial years. In other words, 45 going into next financial year and 45 the year after. Rob asked how realistic that was. Look, that's predominantly been done for financial modelling purposes at this point in time. As we move through and there's a high degree of certainty as to how the program will pan out, we'll come back to this committee with the actual timing of those. But what we tend to find is, with deferrals in particular, is you're talking about projects that are already in progress or are imminently about to start, and therefore there's a far greater degree of certainty around the timing of those. The issue you probably want to focus more on is the impact on next year and the following year's approved capital program, and how those deferrals impact on that, and if there needs to be any shift or movement in that period. And again, that's an issue and a topic that is identified for the annual plan workshop next week to give you an opportunity to debate that and be all over that. Work in progress, we're reporting at the November period as at 493 million. It's a slight movement from the previous report, and within that amount we've got 126.9 million, which we classify as outstanding. And I know I say at every meeting it's the outstanding item that we need to be concerned about, because that's the work that should have been capitalised but has not, and we're actively managing that and working through that. I thought I advised Councillor Pascoe yesterday, but I'll just give you an update. Look, I think we are starting to see some good progress through the organisational emphasis in this area, and as of yesterday, WIP had I need to get my bit of paper so I don't misquote myself. The whip had reduced to, excuse me, councillors, it's had reduced down to 469. Now, you might not think that's big, but you've got to remember that every month that we add 20 or 25 million of capital expenditure, it adds onto that whip, so it's always going up. So we're trying to keep ahead of it's going up, and we're trying to bring it down. But I think the important number there is that the outstanding whip, as at yesterday, had dropped down to 100 mil. So, you know, again, that to me shows real positive progress in this space, and it's something that we're going to just continue to really be focused on as over the next 4 months as we head towards the end of the financial year. Within the report, there's 5 projects classified as orange. Orange, the meaning they've got a risk identified with them that requires monitoring and managing them, and they're highlighted through the report. They're predominantly timing, and timing that really speaks again back to your deferral issue. Okay, and so they're documented in the report. And then finally, I'll just conclude with saying, look, cost escalation does continue to be a portfolio risk, both for this year and for future years. And again, given the nature of it and the significance of it, look, it's an issue that will again be discussed at next week's annual plan workshop, and give you a far greater opportunity to understand what's happening in that space and the impacts on the program. So I didn't intend to talk too much today, and I believe we've got Mark Cox from the Borough who wrote the original report. He'll be here, or he'll be virtually here to present and to help give you some understanding as to the recommendations they made initially. So on that, I'm happy to take the rest of the report as read and then take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Questions, please, colleagues. I'll start. Yeah, Councillor Dave.
Oh, thanks. Ian, and it may be Chris, that I've got a couple of question areas. One's to do with the paragraph 27, the NZTA subsidies. Now, I realise this is a 5-month report. It seems to be running a bit lower than the percentage of year would sort of suggest. 39 million out of, and we'd approved 101 million, but then I don't understand the 7.5 million projected shortfall there, because the LTP had 101 million and the forecast is 94 million. Is that because of deferred work, or because we don't think we're going to get subsidies for some projects, or?
The primary reason for the shift between the approved figure of 101 and the figure we reported at 94 is the deferrals, as the revenue associated with the deferrals, Councillor McPherson.
So we're just going to get the revenue
later?
Yeah.
It's not, that revenue's not under threat. It's just now becomes a timing issue.
Okay, and we're a little bit behind still. The percentage of year gone, the 39 million should be a little bit higher. Is that? Than even on the 94, it seems a little bit behind, knowing that December and January are low activity months. So I'm just wondering whether the 94 is realistic. It might be somewhat less than that, or are we going to chew into it over the next 3 months?
Yeah, I'll be careful what I say next, but yeah, look, you'll find that there'll be this quite significant expenditures coming up over the next January, February, March. We were just talking in the meeting prior to this with Andrew Parsons about what's happening out in the Peacocks project, and of course that's a significant amount of expenditure that's all subsidisable. But I'd also note that within that 94 million, it's not simply just NZTA subsidy. There is also significant external revenue streams coming in, apparently from the government, maybe around the Ruakura area with the spine road work that's going on in that space, and also money coming in to assist with the 3 water stimulus program as well. So it's not simply just NZTA. Okay. But look, to say we're behind, I wouldn't say that was accurate.
Too early.
Too early. Yeah, and we'll give you another update at the next report.
Yeah, I can understand that. Thanks. Look, the other one was a couple of risk projects. On page 18 of our report, it's paragraphs 45 and 46. The Talbot Cycleway extension at the south end of the city, I'm a bit worried. We had an estimated completion date December 2021. That's fine. COVID's extended that, but now it's a much more generalised mid-2022. Thinking, well, elections coming up. Sarah and Bunty are going to want to show that we've actually completed some of this cycleway area. Not that I'm not interested. So how definite can we be there, Chris? Yeah, pass it on to Chris.
Tag out.
Good morning, councillors. So we're relatively confident on that. We're now in the back straight of construction, so we've got some reasonable confidence that's going to be achieved. We're also.
But what's the mid?
Well, we're around April, May at the moment,
Okay.
is where we're at, and we've got reasonable confidence around that, and we're working closely with our partner councils and Waka Kotahi as well. Obviously, it's a joint project with Waipa District and Waikato District, and also with some central government funding attached to it as well. So we do have reasonable confidence now in terms of progress to completion.
Okay, no, that sounds great there. I guess we'll get an update in the next Finance Committee on that particular completion date expectation as well.
Yes, we can provide a further update on that, probably through a
just to
GM's report to one of the committees.
Track that. And the following one, I don't know who's handling this, number 46, Tristram Collingwood intersection upgrade. Yesterday at the discussion on Ward Street and lessons to be learnt, one of the lessons that people talked about in the meeting was are we maybe going a bit fast with a potentially contentious intersection upgrade design at Tristram Collingwood, and should we tie-ho on that a bit until we can do some more iterations with the local community and the users of that area? And would that push it out a bit, or have we built in some decent consultation period there? More than the normal was what we were suggested. Well, certainly one councillor suggested yesterday.
Yep, we can certainly take that on board. So for that project, there is a report planned to come back to the next Infrastructure Operations Committee meeting this month, where we can probably discuss that one in more detail, including the preferred options following on from a briefing last year as well. But certainly
Could we have a look at the timeline, so
Yep.
the report have the timeline built into that discussion, so it's not just on what the design is, but what's the timeline, who are we consulting,
Yep.
how are we going back to them and checking that sort of stuff?
Yep, and certainly taking that feedback on board from previous projects as well. So understand that. Thank you.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Angela.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just on page 18 under portfolio risks, and I see I'm reading 49, Roman numeral 2, around discussions with contractors indicating shortages and significant cost escalations. And then I did read paragraph 51 around the Burl reports, but it didn't really give me any commentary. So on my question, which is how confident are we that the rise in these, increase in these contracts are for materials and not a contractor taking advantage of the situation to raise the costs? Do we have a mechanism to be able to test that? Because it would appear to me that it could be a great opportunity to ratchet up the price.
Councillor Rea, Councillor O'Leary, sorry. First thing I'd say is, look, this issue will get a lot of airtime next week in the workshop on the annual plan in terms of how the cost escalation is to be managed. In terms of that, you'll note back on that Snell Drive recommendation we're making, but part of that was to take advantage of a contractor who's on site and in terms of material, being able to get materials now and so we don't run the risk of the market putting delays in place or cost escalation and us paying more than we wanted to. So it's been a really good outcome. In terms of monitoring the marketplace, Chris has joined me, so.
Yeah, Councillor, I was probably just going to reassure you that we're still, looking for competition in our pricings. So, I think what's happening now is, at a point in time, contractors were prepared to accept risk on escalation and materials because escalation was so low. But what you're seeing and you're reading now is risk profile has changed, so contractors are not wanting to take that risk. So they're wanting to put the risk onto the client to create, a level playing field. So we're seeing more and more now that risk coming back to us, and I think that's happening right across the contract sector, but our approach is level playing field and competition where we can, or benchmarking with rates. So I'm pretty confident it's not the contractor industry trying to take advantage of the situation. We're very aware of not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, okay. That's great. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. I've got seat 11's disappeared, whoever that was. Okay, I've got Mungai KG.
Janie.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Yep.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. Kia ora tātou. I just wanted clarification on the potential domino effect of the deferrals on resourcing and delivery being discussed in detail at next week's kaupapa around the annual plan versus the need to labour it here. So my understanding is we're going to discuss it next week, so no need to go on about it today. I just want clarification of that.
Sorry. Look, I think that's are really true. Like when you come to the workshop next week, we're going to have a handout that will give you visibility on every single project in the 3 years, and we're looking to put a risk profile on each project in terms of what we think the escalation risks are, what we think the delivery risks are. So you'll have that documentation shortly, which will give you great visibility on everything. David can talk to it, but Bill, I think, are going to be at that meeting as well to talk about some of their reports. So we're gearing up for a really good and comprehensive discussion about that next week.
Kia ora. Thank you for that.
I think what we may be achieving here today is just giving you a heads up in terms of the areas that we would like to ensure will be discussed next week, rather than asking you to give us that detail today. If I'm reading the meeting, Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair Rob. My question, first question, was just around the timing. For Victoria Street and the work that's happening there, with the work around the theatre. It looks like we're doing investigation, but we haven't yet had a conversation with elected members around kind of what outcomes we're wanting from this project and things. So I'm just wondering that where we expect that, 'cause looking at where things are at the moment.
Is that really something that we could discuss at the operations?
Okay, if we flag it, that would be useful.
Yeah, unless it's around the financial aspects of it. I think we've got a budgeted figure, haven't we, for the infrastructure around the theatre.
Okay, I'm happy to hold that for the appropriate committee. The other question was more around timing and the finances, was Ward Street and the upgrade there. And there's no kind of time frame put beside that. And I'm wondering, is that what timing we're expecting now in terms of aligning with the developments on that street, and are we needing to defer spending or possibly consider whether it's better to focus more on that funding more on somewhere else like Alexandra Street or other areas? I'm just wondering, are we actually going to have to wait longer than we thought?
So to answer that question, we are actively looking at, because that program was particularly proposed to align with the development of the Tuapapa site, and that's obviously been deferred in terms of some of the timing as well. So we are actively looking at the timing of that to align with when the associated development is happening. So there is likely going to be the timing of that project will push out, and that will present, I guess, a decision for elected members in terms of whether potentially that looks to get reprioritised or whether that funding just gets deferred.
Okay.
So that will come back probably through some of the annual plan discussions as well. And just a quick update on the work around the theatre as well. There is actively work happening and discussions with Foster's, who are developing that site, in terms of the the opportunities for development of Embassy Park and the associated roading works, and that an update will probably come through the Central City advisory group in the first instance, and then and subsequently to council, because we are looking at working with Fosters to develop or deliver some of that work potentially with utilising the funding as allocated as a contribution to the overall development.
Okay.
So we can provide further feedback on that at a later date.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Kesh.
Thank you. Thanks. Just coming back to some of those risks that we were talking about a few minutes ago, in terms of the cost escalation risks that we all know about, and then you've got COVID contract claims that would possibly soon follow. And I'm just thinking about, the last 24 hours on the news, we've seen the talk about the rise in material costs. So it's national news. Everyone knows that it's happening.
Yes.
So question is, it sounds like a snowball effect. We know it's happening. We know the costs are going to rise. We know that contractors may claim the differential if the costs rise. So at what point do we say, hang on, we know that if this is going to increase exponentially, let's just pause, take kind of what we're actually doing, wait for a supplier, for materials to come back into supply, and then we keep going? Like, are we having those conversations with suppliers? And
so that's absolutely the purpose of the annual plan briefing next week. So the point of giving visibility on all of the projects and what we see as the escalation or delivery risk, then might drive some council decisions about further deferrals if that's what you want to do. So that's the intent of the briefing, is to talk about those things and how we might manage that risk. Like we'll attempt to quantify some of those risks for council as well, and align that with the financial strategy and a whole range of things. And so hopefully that will be the better forum to have that discussion. Yeah.
Are suppliers, are they making projections yet? Is anyone saying, in 18 months or something like that, the supply will be back to regular, or is it everything still up in the air? Or?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why David's bringing along a representative from Burl to talk to some of that. They previously presented a report that said it's 4 months old, and said that their view that things will come back to normal, from about year 2, 3. Not forgetting that we've had a big step change, and right now that's going to affect the program. So they'll be looking to update that advice, because there's a lot happened in the last 4 months since they wrote that report, and we're all reading the commentary, we're all seeing the problems. The problems for us are sort of multi problems in terms of not only material supplies, but just with the current COVID situation, is just absenteeism from the supply chains. I think is the big one that we're staring down the barrel of now. And that's starting to be real. There's a few things already starting to come through. I'm in close contact with the construction accord. They had a bit of a briefing the other day and did a presentation, and the construction industry is expecting something like 20 to 22% absenteeism over and above normal, which is quite significant, ramping up in early March for a sustained period. So once again, it's only modelling. As Councillor Dave and Blind Freddie keep telling me, modelling is only a model, but it's real, it's here, and that's the purpose of our briefing next week.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Thanks, Chair Rob. Look, I don't know if it's helpful or not. I just in regard to Sarah's question about the theatre design, I did speak to Tilly Murcott yesterday, and we're still some months away from having that detail in terms of the design. So happy to catch up offline to talk about it, Sarah. Cheers.
Thanks, Jeff.
Can I just jump there? I think there might have been a notion from Councillor Sarah that staff don't get too ahead of councillors in what we're doing there. So I can give you that assurance that we won't be doing that. So all of those decisions will be coming back through some form of elected member decision making.
Councillor Mark D.
Just a quick note to touch on what Chris and Kesh were talking about. There was a good article on the Right Wing News this morning that I listened to, and it was about supply chain issues softening.
Thank you. I don't see. I don't see any further questions, but I've got a couple of questions here. And first, and perhaps they're interconnected to what we've been discussing. When I look at paragraph 30, Ian, where you've got estimated deferrals, and this was as at 30 November of 40.5 million. And you mentioned earlier that your predictions now is that that could hit 90 million. I'm just, am I correct with that in fact our delivery might be as low as 300 million? If you add another 40 on top of another 50 on top of the 40 that you've got in that chart, that our delivery of the capital program up to June could be now about 300 million rather than the 384 that we started with.
Yeah, so we are 100%
386.
100% correct, Rob. So at the moment we're bringing the 40.5 to this committee for approval to formally acknowledge a deferral and move to a future period, but we're also anticipating there's a further 50 million that we expect by the end of the financial year. And so if you were to take that into account based on these numbers, then that 351 would drop down to 300.
To 300.
All other things being equal.
Yeah. Do you anticipate that's going to change even more in terms of the way that, you know, I know, again, we're coming back to modelling, aren't we, Chris? But do you anticipate that 90 million that you're predicting now as the deferrals could further increase over the next, what have we got, 5 months?
Yeah.
5 months until balance date?
Yeah. I jumped in to come and answer that in case Ian said no. Look, we've got a very volatile situation at the moment, and this absenteeism does worry me. You know, the indications are that we might have, contract sites actually have to slow down for all sorts of reasons. So it's very volatile at the moment. Like the 90 million is our best guess. And reminding councillors too, if we hit $300 million, that would be an all-time record for us in terms of capital expenditure in and done in a COVID environment.
Yep.
You know, so we ramped up from 80 million 3 or 4 years ago to 300 million. So it's a massive program. At this point in time, we're doing really well. But look, it is really volatile at the moment, and it'd be just hard to predict what's actually going to happen over the next 2 to 3 months.
Yep. Okay. And my last question, and you might not want to stay there, Chris, because you might be able to help with an answer. Are we getting to a position now where we're seeing cost escalation, that we're able to split the cost escalation between, you know, what COVID is costing us, what the resourcing shortfall, you know, around labour and materials, and then inflation, which is the kind of new dragon that's kind of appeared in quite a big way since about October, November of last year, so that we're able to see, you know, where the impact of the cost escalation is, because that might become reasonably important in terms of how we develop the annual plan and whether or not, you know, the predicted increase in rates in the long-term plan needs to be reconsidered.
Look, I
know it's every contract will be different, but you know, is there kind of like a pattern developing that's?
I think one of the patterns, and you know, Andrew or Ian or Chris can jump in if they have a different view, but I think over the last 18 months, we've seen a lot of contractual COVID costs through lockdown and contractual issues. I'll go out on the ledge to say I think we're through that, with how we're operating under COVID now. The only tag to that is this unusual absenteeism and whether that gives rise to unexpected situation and we get contractual claims around that. But I'd like to be optimistic to think that we're through the COVID claims. I think there still is a risk about the productivity, but I think all of the COVID is just creating this high escalation environment, and all of the material cost issues is probably a result of COVID. So that's the impact of COVID we're seeing now is just on global supply chains and product availability. Yeah. So look, hopefully the bill person will be able to give some insights to what they're seeing sort of nationally and globally.
So we've asked Bill to include that in their presentation next week. Is that?
Let's hand that over to David.
Not sure about the brief I've given them apart from just giving an update on their November report. So they'll be available for questions as well.
Okay.
So I wonder, councillors, about bringing along a contractor, someone like Downers, that elected members can question as well. So if there's any value in that, sort of let me know after the meeting, and I could probably arrange that just for a quarter of an hour session.
Whether that might be quite useful at the next briefing or something once we've got our feet under the table and.
Yeah, I just think elected members might find that quite valuable to talk directly to one of our big contractors.
Mm-hmm. All right, no further questions. We have got a recommendation. Sorry.
Hand up on the screen.
Sorry, Jadine, you've got a further question?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise one comment and one question. So the first comment is on page 17, paragraph 41, and just want to acknowledge the team and the great work that they've done to actively address and reduce the WIP balance, which, us accountants know that that's not always easy, so well done, team.
Thank you.
And then coming back to the executive summary and the recommendation that's put to the committee around the increase of $5 million to the contract, but it's probably my level of understanding of this. So we're asking for an increase of $5 million, but it doesn't actually impact the overall approved contract sum. I just wanted a quick explanation as to why it is. Is it because we finished something quicker or faster or better? Is it because there was a lot of scope there for additional works to be added in?
Yeah. Probably two points I'd make. One is, so this is not an extra funding request. We have the funding. This is just about how we deliver an approved project. So the Snell Drive pump station is in very close proximity to the Peacocks wastewater project that we've been doing. We let a contract some time ago to CB Civil to do the Peacocks section of the work, and we let it for an approved contract sum of $28 million. So, and there was, at that time, we had quite a bit of contingency in that project. So Andrew, behind me, his team have been tightly managing that project, and they've found lots of value engineering opportunities. We've had a really good contractor. He's finishing that project one year ahead of his own program. So it's been delivered, quite a bit under the value that we thought that he would deliver the Peacocks work. And so there's this headroom in the contractor, which we've still got the approved contract sum. So it doesn't mean that we can then, without council decision, go and add this project to it. So we're asking to deliver this project through that contract. We don't have to ask for an increase because of the good performance of this contractor in delivering underneath. So the headroom is there. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. It's headroom. I appreciate that. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Right, I don't see any further questions from the committee, so I will move the staff recommendation, which includes the the work on the Snell Drive pump station. Do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
I've got Jadine is seconding that. Thank you, Jadine. Is there any debate? No debate, so therefore I will put the motion. Do you want it on the board or?
By the hands as we did, just because.
Okay, right, we'll do it by show of hands. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against?
Great, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks, Ian. Thanks, Chris's. Okay, next report is item 7. Welcome, Tracy. It is the Financial Performance and Strategy Report, again to the 30th of November 2021. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Rob. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So today I'm here to present to you the November 21 results. So you would have seen that the accounting result year to date in November continues to report quite favourably. And as reported at that the last Finance Committee we had last year, most of this is actually still due to the non-cash gain that we have in the revaluation of our interest swaps. So the balancing books result, again, to the year-to-date in November is also still favourable and $6 million ahead of budget. In that space, we've got favourable results in the operating and maintenance costs and obviously the revenue in our subsidies and grants. What I would like to talk about today, though, as well, that year-to-date result is looking quite favourable when we're looking in November. You will see, though, that we are forecasting our balancing the books result to be $7 million in deficit by June of this year. So that's obviously $3 million worse than our original budget, and you can see that in our graph in paragraph 56 of the report. So there are a couple of reasons for this. So one of them, obviously, we're forecasting our revenue to be down. So obviously, topical conversation around COVID and the effect that that has on our visitor destinations and tourism activities. So while some of those had a great January, obviously it's a year-to-date result. So October, November and December weren't that great in some of those, and some of those activities are still being constrained, obviously, with being in the level that we're in now. So we are forecasting revenue down in those spaces. Some of the gain that you're seeing in the operating and maintenance costs at the moment from year to date, so that means we've delayed some of those works. The team is anticipating to catch up on a lot of that maintenance type work in the next 6 months. So that's again why we are anticipating those results at June to be what they are at budget. And then on top of that, again, we also have obviously actual additional expenses that are hitting the organisation due to COVID. So at the end of January, we're up to an extra $600,000 purely on extra costs that we've got because of COVID. So that's in areas like cleaning and masks and a lot of security for our sites in that space. So in paragraph 54, you'll see the outcome of our revenue and debt graph. So again, we're still seeing the positivity coming through from our opening balance, which was all the extra DCs and the cash we had coming through from last year. The forecasted deferrals, as you just heard Ian talk about today, so obviously from a cash perspective, that makes a difference in that area as well. So at the moment, we're sitting at 183% compared to what our budget was of 193% in that space. So with that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tracy. Questions from committee members, please?
Me.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Mayor Paula. I haven't forgotten you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Just in respect to that, so do we expect any of that to change before the end of the year? And because we're going into the annual plan conversations, and we know we're going to, on the one hand, defer work, and on the other hand, have escalation of costs, and on the other hand, have quite a long, eye-watering list of requests from elected members and committees as additions to the annual plan. So what What are we, will we be getting that full picture as part of the annual plan, David? Is that where we...
Yeah.
Is that where we see it?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right. So what the team are actually doing right now and have spent the last couple of days, so they have started, what we're calling our base, which is the results that you're seeing today, so the balancing the books and the debt to revenue ratio. We've added on a few of the internal things, fix-ups and housekeeping and whatnot, and then we've got what I guess our starting point is. We are also modelling all of the list of all of the additional things that we have to bring to the table, and we'll model all of that through as well. And again, just like we did with LTP, we can turn all of that off and on, so things can come and be added to it, and things can come out. So yeah, so that's definitely what's happening on Thursday next week.
So I know that when we look at COVID and wonder what's this year's going to be like versus previous 3, we've almost been through 3 now. It's crazy days, but. Are we sort of making some predictions or best guesses, if it's like, in terms of how those trends will continue with revenue, for example? Because we know H3 has really been impacted by events not being able to come. I presume, Sean, you're predicting what it might be like over the next financial... Oh, look.
We're doing forecasts every month at the moment,
okay.
if not weekly.
Okay, and so by the time we get to the LTP, we'll have some kind of, I know it won't be perfect, but a forecast. And I guess that's the same, Lance, for things like the polls, even community centres and other things where we usually get a little bit of revenue.
Yeah, so we've tried to actually keep to the LTP Year 2 budget the same from an internal staff perspective, and obviously that will move. A lot of the ones that do get affected by COVID with revenue also has expenses that kind of usually go with it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So especially in Sean's area, obviously the more revenue, the more expenses, and kind of it has a bit of a net effect. A little bit harder in the community type spaces, especially around pools, for example. Obviously, we still have to keep running the pools and paying our staff, but obviously we are restricted by the amount of visitors that we can have in. So there are some slight differences, but I guess from a staffing perspective, we're starting off from it's a no change budget for Year 2 that we had already anticipated.
Okay, so I think through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to flag that I'm really keen to have those various different levers identified separately and together in the annual plan lead up, because we did run down a list the other day of annual plan projects, and some of them are quite big, I'll just say that. And if we added them all up, it's quite a lot of money, so we need to be able to play within the different spaces, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yep,
that's exactly what we can do. Thank you.
And my questions, I can't see any others there, my questions kind of follow on from that, Tracy. The October balancing the books predicted deficit was 5.7, went up in a month to 7.1. Are you, for next week, and do you have a prediction now as to, from November, say, through to January, what your prediction is on that 7.1? You know, has it gone up further, or has it dropped back a little bit in terms of the 7.1 million prediction for balancing the books?
No, from a balancing books result, I'm quite comfortable that it is what it is. So obviously we've been through...
It is what it is now?
Yeah, it is what it is now, and that's what we'll be going to. I know there are some other costs coming, but they won't be, they'll be part of the accounting result, not part of the balancing the books. COVID-related type costs.
So in terms of what we were talking about in the last report, the capital costs, generally if we get an increase in a contract price, we end up funding that through debt.
Yes.
But I understand that there's requirements now that some of those costs are revenue rather than being added directly to debt.
Yeah.
Have we got a good handle on that as to you know, what Chris was talking about in terms of absenteeism and so forth, and whether or not those increased costs and some of the capital projects may impact on our revenue and therefore impact on balancing the books?
So that's exactly what I was just meaning. So the team is exactly working on that. So a lot of those costs were already kind of hidden in the contracts, if you like, and it's only just recently that we've become aware that we're not allowed, from an accounting standards perspective, to have them as part of the project. So we've got to go through and pull them all back out again. So they will be hitting, obviously, the Statement of Comprehensive Income. I'm working with audit because in my mind they're one-off costs. They're not part of our everyday revenue versus everyday expenses, which is what our whole balancing the books is about.
Yep.
So hence the reason why I mentioned it hit the accounting result, but I'll be
not
fighting pretty hard for
yep.
it to hit the balancing the books result and for that not to happen.
Okay, do you have an idea of the dollars involved?
It's quite large.
Yeah, okay, I figured
Yeah.
it might be, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot because what we're talking about is some of the highest projects, highest value projects that we have around the city, and because they're the older ones with the older, I guess, contract clauses in them, they're the ones that are affecting us. So
some of the predictions that Chris was talking about in the last report, absenteeism and inflation, the impact of labour and material, will that will also impact, or is that likely to be a debt issue in terms
No,
of...
so that's just genuinely now the cost of building those particular things of whatever it is. What we're talking about and what the standards just changed in this year is what they call wastage cost. So it's basically paying when no one was able to work. So when we're in all lockdown 4 kind of thing and no one was able to do anything. So the paying the additional labour and paying for the additional materials and all of that, actually that now is the value of the asset, unfortunately. What we do have to be really careful of, though, is overinflating the value of that asset so that in 10 years' time, when I'm doing a revaluation on that asset, that I don't then have the hit then. So that's why that we sort of have to, the team are working on pulling all of those costs and being really clear on what we're doing and what, because at some point in time, you're either going to have the hit to the P&L now or you're going to have the hit later when I do a revaluation. So,
Do you think the accounting standard, though, might also, we may not have lockdowns going forward, but we may have people needing to isolate, and that might be interpreted as another form of lockdown for those people who become absentees from being able to work.
Yeah.
And so that cost might fall into that same accounting category.
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those watch this space, because last year, obviously, when we were right at the beginning of COVID, this standard didn't exist.
Yep.
And we basically just put everything through capital and it was business as usual. So in that time, they've created this new standard and now we're adhering to that. And as we all know, this is evolving every day. So obviously, it's just us keeping an eye out for what they're going to expect and any changes coming up and making sure that we're set up to adhere to that.
Do you think audit will have an answer for you before next week's
I can certainly ask, absolutely. I can
Yeah,
have a
it would be
conversation.
quite useful to know because I think that our balancing the books, becomes really a bit of a gauge for measuring, whether we're right with our long-term plan predictions and what we might be needing to predict into the next financial year, as Mayor Paul has already alluded to, in terms of the new projects and the new spends that staff and elected members will be seeking.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to also, again, going back to that whole interpretation of why we created balancing the books in the first place as far as everyday revenue versus everyday expenses. And, at what point does this become normal in BAU as opposed to one-off costs because of a pandemic? And I guess that's the fine line as we go through this, because it's starting to feel more and more like this is BAU. And part of what we are going to be doing for the next wee while, as opposed to a kind of one-off kind of cost. So.
And look, I'm not disagreeing with your logic, but sometimes what Audit New Zealand tell us we have to do as we're told, rather than how we might want to argue the issue through. Yeah,
that's right. So I will definitely be having a discussion with them on this topic, because it won't be just our council, obviously, that will have this. So, yeah.
David, you want to?
Yeah, if I can just reinforce what Tracy's saying, I mean, the whole purpose for redeveloping the balancing the books equation way back in the 2018 long-term plan was so that elected members had transparency around the city living within its means. And so when you have these one-off costs, it's not fiddling the books, it's not an ongoing cost in which the city needs to make sure it covers with its rate take. So it's absolutely legitimate, and I back what Tracy's saying.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. I've got a question from Councillor Mark Bunting.
Thanks, Chair Rob. Kia ora te whānau. Just something my ears perked up when Mayor Paula was talking about this eye-watering list of projects. I can't find it. I've been looking for it, and it would kind of help with contextualising my thinking. Is that out anywhere, Paula?
No.
It's not. We were just agenda setting, and it was only yesterday. Okay. You will get it you will get to see it as part of those workshops. It was just a first cut conversation. But it's work in progress, and I got to have a quick look at it when we were setting the agenda. That's all.
Okay.
But I'm not holding it back. It just isn't.
No.
It isn't quite ready to come out yet.
Yeah,
So-
it'd be
so
helpful to see it as
you're-
soon as possible anyway, because that will frame our thinking as quickly as it could.
Absolutely. Everyone will have access to the list.
So your eyes can stay dry today, Mark?
Finish this meeting so I can sign it off. It's sitting with me at the moment, yeah. So hopefully tomorrow, because I need to
Thanks,
review
Mark.
it. And with the
Hopefully
final
tomorrow,
stuff, and you
Mark,
and I
it
need to-
seems.
yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions? Imminent.
Imminent. There you are. That's a
great
good
word.
Imminent.
All right, we have a staff recommendation on page 45, and I will move that we receive the report and that we approve the various movements and adjustments as set out in 4A, B and C. Do I have a seconder, please? Maxine, thank you. Is there any debate? I'll just make a couple of very brief comments and thank Tracy and David and the finance team, as well as Ian and his team on the work that they're doing. I know that at the moment there are a heap of balls in the air, and I think that we will have an interesting meeting next Thursday and the following meetings that we have on the annual plan. I think it's going to be an annual plan where we're going to have to use a good deal of judgment and skill, because there's a lot of things happening out there that we have got absolutely no control over. And with the very robust long-term plan that we have, I believe that we need to include some degree of caution, but I think we've got the skills around the table to make sure that we get a decision around some very, very good outcomes for our residents, bearing in mind that the same issues and the same balls, some of the same balls in the air that we've got, our ratepayers also have. And so there will be some hurting going on out there, and we need to be cognizant of that. No further debate. Okay, I'll put the motion to the meeting, and by show of hands, those in favour. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. We move on now to item 8, which is the library management system contract renewal. Welcome, Stephen. Welcome, Rebecca.
Tēnā koutou e tēnei ahi. Chair Rob, elected members and Mangai Māori. Ko Stephen Penrusco aho, no Libraries Director Te Manutaki Tohirau aho. With me today is Rebecca Whitehead, Unit Manager of Community Services, and Helen Parkey, Community General Manager. Before taking your questions, I'd like to highlight for you 3 key points from the report. A library management system, or LMS, is a core piece of software providing essential functionality for the management of a library's collection. The contract amount of 1.3 million over 7 years is fully budgeted through the long-term plan. The benefit of us remaining in the Kotui Consortium is due to the scale and ability to provide a higher specification and lower cost LMS than we would be likely to negotiate through an individual contract. I'm happy to take your questions. Ngā mihi nui.
Thanks, Stephen. Questions? Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Just give us a picture of this contract and this software system with our other, regional libraries, Waikato and Waipa. Obviously, as you know, we're on a journey for hopefully an integrated regional sort of kind of service. Can you just give us an idea of how that, how you interact?
So there are around 50 libraries nationwide that are part of the Kotui Consortium.
Right.
Rebecca, do you know, is WDC and Waipa both?
Yep, so all Waikato councils, with the exception of Waipa, are participants in the Kotui Consortium, and my understanding is they are on the same product, but they're not part of the consortium as a partner as yet.
So Waipa is the only, everyone else in the Waikato?
Correct.
Yeah. Is Waipa afraid they're going to be taken over? Thank you.
You've fit your questions, Martin?
That's
your
fine.
question.
No, I mean, all that, just if I may, as a I mean, obviously that's a very, my deep affection for Waipa aside, that's a very significant answer from a point of view of, we were talking about boundary lists, we're talking about sharing of information, we're talking about Waikato-wide services. So through the chair, essentially, that's the answer you're giving me, that you're very focused on that interlinks, particularly with Waikato.
Correct. And when we first made the move to the system in 2017, that was certainly part of the considerations, was aligning our product with others to ensure greater collaboration into the future.
Thank you.
Councillor Mark, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, new hand, thanks. And look, happy to move this, Chair Rob, if that's okay. Just a question for you, Stephen. Kia ora. Just want to double check that we're fully budgeted for the advent of the new library in Rototuna. This isn't going to be coming at us again when that opens up?
Correct. So the library management system is the piece of software that manages our collection. So it doesn't matter how many branches we have, it's one piece of software. So Rototuna, doesn't impact on the operational costs at all.
No, that's because I'm assuming our collections will go up as our library units go up, yeah?
We are currently growing the collection to be prepared for Rototuna opening.
Cool.
So we've budgeted no additional expenditure for collection purchases, even though we're adding a 7th branch, but we're beginning that journey now.
Right. And how well equipped is this system for perhaps more remote outreach, things like Enderley, Norton, Beta, etc., should we decide to go down that road?
Look, wherever you can have an internet connection, you'll be able to dial into this. So if we had a mobile library or smaller pop-up libraries, we could take council laptops and be able to work the system, yeah.
That's great. Hey, thanks guys, great work. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Maxine.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Stephen. In terms of the operational costs, I note that there is a 4% CPI increase allowed in that budget. Should the CPI be greater than that, which it's predicted to be this year, will there need to be adjustments made to that contract sum?
Question. No, it'll be fine.
Okay. And we're confident that in the 3 + 2 + 2, the whole of the budget will fit within that 1.322 million.
Yes. Yep.
Good, thank you.
Before I return to Councillor Martin, I've got a couple of questions. Are the majority of the other users, you mentioned 43 out of 67 councils, are they likely to stay with the current provider? And I guess the flow-on question is if the numbers dropped, would our cost, our share of the cost, go up, or are we contractually protected by the price that we've agreed to?
That's a good question, Councillor Rob, and to answer the second part first, yes, this contract, and it follows on from Councillor Maxine's question too, the contract sets the fixed sum for this, so we are protected in that. In terms of the size of the consortium, if other members were to go, it would need to be a large member of the consortium before there would be a significant cost change for us. In reality, it's more likely that additional councils will join. So Kōtui Consortium tends to bring on 2 or 3 new partners every year to 18 months, depending on the work program and the size of the library. And there are other bigger library systems in New Zealand who will investigate this as their library management systems come up for a renewal. So it's not often that happens. It tends to be kind of a 10-year thing for libraries that you look at this process. So it could become cheaper in the future with a growing membership.
So you're quite comfortable if the numbers did reduce or a major council dropped out, we wouldn't get a lesser service in terms of enhancements or improvements that might result as a result of the company having fewer clients?
No, the level of service is fixed for the consortium. What we might lose in that instance is some of the innovations that we get through our collaboration as members. So quite often we'll come up with initiatives or products that we work on together as a collective. Stephen's team's part of that and quite significantly involved in that. And so some of that work might drop off. But no, the product delivery itself would remain.
Okay. But even so, we are significantly more benefits from those enhancements through the consortium than we could actually negotiate ourselves.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I have been involved in user groups, and I know if they're working very well, they work very well for the benefit of all of the users, and especially the ones with the squeaky wheels who are active there. Would Hamilton, by its size and active involvement in the user group, influence the changes to mitigate those disadvantages that you outlined in paragraph 23? And I just need to look at what that disadvantage was. The consortium.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So
okay. And you've got evidence that that's happened in the past with our active involvement.
Correct, and so we have Stephen's on the management exec for the group, as well as his team being involved in a number of the project groups, and in the past we've been on the board in terms of negotiating contract terms, so we are actively involved in mitigating those.
Yep, great. Okay, Martin, do you want to proceed with your...
You can rule this out of order.
I'll rule it then.
No, because it's not exactly financial, it's about what this tool gives. Now, for example, we have one official, just please, we have three official languages, obviously. And in terms of, the multilingual approach and the consumer-friendly approach, so that I guess number one question is where we're at in terms of tools that we can actually use, obviously our 2 written languages, but other multilingual languages. And the second question is in terms of the national regional aspect, how friendly of that if I was wanting to search some sort of document a la from Tauranga or whatever?
So if I understand the questions right, one is around languages.
Yes.
So one of the benefits of working with Suzy Dynex is that they're an international company and there's a lot of language functionality within the LMS. They're also developing a Te Reo component. They're the only LMS that we're aware of currently developing Te Reo. The ability to search across the country, is that what you're also asking? So at the moment, our enterprise search feature, which is an add-on to the LMS, only looks at, from a customer point of view, only looks at our collection, but we can go in and we can look at, so we could help a customer and look across all of the consortium's collections.
So if I can just ask you left field, I'm a migrant, you know, my heritage might be in another language, another country, albeit maybe in 100 years, and I want to read some beautiful novels and writers from the state of Bengal, for example, all right? And it won't, you know. How do we help customers to search other databases, just so you know, in terms of those different traditions, and particularly, I'm thinking particularly with our older migrants and people younger?
Good question. I don't know if you're aware, Councillor, but we do have an international section with world languages. And one of the things that we're very encouraging our community, particularly our non-English speaking community, is to recommend titles. We purchase titles for users. It's very hard, I guess, for the library staff to choose the appropriate Bengali material. But we can also connect people up to databases and other tools through our internet connectivity to fulfil what you're talking about.
Through the Chair, that's a very good answer, and obviously what you're telling me as a layperson, you are onto it. Absolutely. No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. All right, I don't see any further questions from committee members, so I will move the staff recommendation, and that is to approve option 1. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is there any debate? No debate. I'll put the motion and ask for a show of hands. Those in favour? Those against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, and thanks Stephen and Rebecca. Next item is item number 9, and that is contract 15066, which is the plumbing and Hvac. Who's presenting that? Ian? Beyond?
No. Good morning for the second time, councillors. My purpose sitting here today for this item is I'd like to introduce to the committee Anita Oliver, who is our facilities unit manager, acting capacity. I'm sure you're all aware that Emily Botchus seconded up to the waters unit at the moment at this time, and Anita has stepped into the role as acting unit manager at this time. So Anita will present the report today. And while I'm introducing, I also would like to introduce just up here in the gallery is Vion de Villiers, who was a principal author of the report. So I'll just do that as well. But
thanks,
I'll let Anita now present the information.
Okay, thanks Ian, and welcome Anita.
Obviously, I'm very new to this. Thank you very much for having me. Good morning to everybody. Today I'm here to present our HVAC and plumbing contract 15006 from Cushman and Wakefield. We're proposing to increase the approved contract sum, and this contract covers our heating, cooling, ventilation, and plus all our plumbing services. I would like to take it as the report's been read. And myself and my colleagues are really happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita. Questions? I'll start the ball rolling in case any further questions pop up. The decision, as I read it, appears to extend the contract by 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, with funding needed for this additional work. Is that, sorry, with funding needed now for this additional work? Is that the correct reading?
No, this what we're requesting is an increase to the contract sum.
Yep.
All the work that's proposed and that has been carried out has been done so under approved budgets.
Right.
And budgets that are approved for both maintenance and projects.
Okay.
So there's no requirement for further funding.
For further funding, okay, okay.
Sorry, Councillor Pascoe, just for purposes of clarity, the section 8 of the report talks about the contract sum was extended by 3 years to 30th of June 2020. That's a typo. That should read 2022. So we're not looking for an extension in time. It simply is an increase in the approved contract sum.
Okay, so is a new contract required from the 1st of July 2022?
Yes, so we're in the progress of a tender process for that right now.
Okay, okay, okay. And so will you bring that back to this committee or to the appropriate committee?
Absolutely.
Before the 1st of July?
Yes.
Yep,
yes.
okay, okay. That appears to answer probably the line of thinking that I had. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rob. A warm welcome. Could I just get a point of clarification? In point 14, it states all the additional work undertaken by facilities has been budgeted in approved plans, but the staff did not recognise the cumulative effect of the approved contract sum, and as such, as a result, the contract has exceeded the ACS by $2.5 million, and you're having to come retrospectively for that approval.
Yes.
I guess I really want to get my head around how that could happen. Yeah, so I look forward to your explanation.
Thank you. At the point in 12, during 2002, there were lots of maintenance tasks formally carried out by other units throughout the council for HVAC, etc. And as part of, and for efficiencies, we pulled it all into being operated by facilities. What obviously didn't happen at the same time was some of the book work in the background. So,
just for clarity, so those other departments had the quantums in their budget?
Yes.
But you took on the assets.
Yep, and the budget.
And the
budget. Can I ask you to explain what happened there?
Yeah, so look, it was an oversight by staff, Councillor Wilson, that what happened was that under the original Cushman contract, they were doing certain amounts of work, and then in 2018, as you heard from the asset audit, and that we basically centralised a lot of the work in the organisation through the facilities unit. It was formerly being done outside the facilities unit, so for an efficiency and effectiveness point of view, it was all brought under the one umbrella under facilities, and then awarded and undertaken through the Cushman's contract. What staff failed to realise is that in adding that additional scope of work to that contract, it was going to breach the approved contract sum. Again, not budget, because the budgets were all approved within those resident units, and that they're all part of the plan. So what we should have done is come to council and said we need an approval to award the approved contract sum, so that Cushman's could carry on doing that work legitimately under a delegations policy. Unfortunately, we failed to do that, and we're doing that today in this report.
Okay, that's fine. Last question. I'm assuming, because it's quite a significant quantum in total, when are we intending to go back out to the open market and re-tender this, $14 million service?
So these are, this is being with procurement at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just double check with my colleague. When we'll be going out in 6 weeks?
Yeah. So the short answer, Councillor Wilson, is this contract is currently out for. We're about to go out to tender for the new contract for the next period of HVAC services.
Post 2023.
Yeah. So because this two. Yeah. So this this contract will expire, and then the new one will be awarded.
Right. And the 2.58 million you're asking retrospectively is within that contract.
Correct.
Too. Okay, I look forward to seeing what the new rates will be.
So just clarification on that, the new contract will be will be the combination of all the little bits that were in previous contracts, and so therefore going forward it will be monitored as one contract.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And if I could, have we improved our systems to ensure that these types of, not errors, but oversights don't happen again? And just in terms of our accounting process, so that when we reallocate things, is there now a more thorough checklist?
Oh, 100%. This is a topic quite close to my heart, Councillor Wilson. Had a meeting just yesterday with our procurement manager, so we're undertaking a piece of work with our internal auditor as well, where we're doing a total review of our contracts register and just understanding that their delegations policy and the processes that we need to go through to ensure that we are meeting that process. And I believe that our internal audit has got a report going to our audit committee in March, which talks specifically to some of these issues. But yeah, certainly organisationally it's getting a lot of focus at the moment in terms of tidying that up.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ewan. Mungai Jadine.
Kia ora. I just wanted to ask a question about whether there are any additional or revised requirements on our HVAC contractors in relation to airborne viruses and the impact that it could have on our facilities and our people contained within those facilities. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yes, we have undergone an audit of every single building and for air quality, and have got things in process at the moment to make sure that every HCC council facility has the required standard. And we're also applying that to new areas. Yep.
Good question, thank you.
Is that why we're often frozen in this chamber?
Our permanent fix is yet to come for here, so in the meantime you have to be a little cold, I'm sorry.
Fair enough, I'll put up with that.
That's why you can't find Chris Allen sometimes, because he's crawling through ducting units. So.
I'm not going to go there, I'd be tempted to comment.
I'm not seeing any further questions from committee members, so let's move to the staff recommendation, and that is item 2 on page 79, and I will move. I've got a mover, Councillor Ewan. Do I have a seconder, please? Oh, thank you, Councillor Ryan. Oh, okay. Sorry, Mayor Paula.
You've got to have eyes everywhere.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any debate? There being no debate, I will put the motion and ask for a show of hands. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Right, thank you. I was just going to say before we put the resolution to exclude, I suggest we have a 15-minute break. So let's put the resolution that Councillor Ewan has moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hand. Against? Carried. If we can resume at 11:10.
You're going to set a new record today, Rob?